What follows in this video is something that can't be explained. Something that betrays the handiwork of a wizard or a witch hiding behind a cryptic veil. This story began as an analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 58, but it quickly led into directions unforeseen, including the very root of football itself and, believe it or not, U.S. presidents like Trump and Biden. Calling upon my unique perspective of reality and my 16 years of intensive research into seeing the world within a world, I present this fascinating look at something most of us blithely ignore. I bring to light the occult, the paranormal, the metaphysical, and the other impossible-to-believe aspects that have clustered around the Chiefs. Many of you will dismiss this as fantasy, and that is fine. You can ignore my conclusions, but you cannot ignore the evidence. So, to those of you who are willing, come with me as I share this absolutely astounding tale. I hope you enjoy. The Kansas City Chiefs football team began life in 1960 as the Dallas Texans. They were owned by Lamar Hunt Sr., who had desperately wanted to form an expansion team in Dallas, but was rebuffed by the National Football League. Hunt joined with others who had also been denied entry and created the American Football League in August of 1959. Perhaps in an effort to get back at Hunt, the NFL decided to create their own team in Dallas, called the Cowboys. They likely knew that the city wasn't large enough to support two teams. After the third season, Hunt moved the Texans to Kansas City and renamed them the Chiefs, after the Kansas City mayor at the time, H. Roe Bartle, whose nickname was the Chief and who had lured them to his city. Their first season as the Chiefs was 1963. It's important to realize at this point that the Chiefs weren't named after Native Americans. That's just a fake facade used to obfuscate their true purpose. They were named after a political leader and were therefore meant to represent political chiefs. It's also important to realize that the AFL's first draft of their first season began on 22 November 1959 and lasted 33 rounds. The significance of this will be shared momentarily. The 1963 football season was not a good one for the Chiefs. They finished with a record of 5-7-2, and they did not qualify for the playoffs. To make matters worse, the number 3 would really begin to assert its dominance over their fate. For example, they won 3 of 5 preseason games in a row, and their longest winning streak of the regular season was 3 games, the last 3 of the season. The Chiefs would also end the season in 3rd place in the AFL West. But those minor flirtations with the number 3 were merely the muted after-effects that soullessly summarized the season. The Chiefs' apparent marriage to this digital demoness would be defined by a terrible tragedy, an enigmatic and dark omen that opened said season. You see, during their 5th preseason game against the Houston Oilers on 31 August 1963, which was held in Wichita, Kansas, rookie running back Stone Johnson, who was a sprinter in the 1960 Summer Olympics in Rome, suffered a fractured vertebrae in his neck. He would tragically die 8 days later, on 8 September. This was the day after the Chiefs' first regular season game, a game they won 59-7 over the Broncos, a franchise record high score, by the way, that stands to this day. The Chiefs were off the following week, taking their bye week a little early, I presume since Johnson died, providing a literal bye week to say goodbye. Even though Johnson was only on the team's active roster during preseason, his jersey, number 33, was subsequently retired. So after winning 3 preseason games in a row, on their 5th game, taking place on a day and month that sums to 3, Stone Johnson becomes critically injured. This is 3 years after his appearance in the 1960 Summer Olympics, where he finished 5th in the 200-meter men's. The number 5 is the 3rd prime. This leads to his jersey, number 33, being retired after his death. That's a lot of 3s. While this likely won't make sense right now, from an astrological context, and therefore from a secret society or a Freemasonic context, 31 August, the date of Stone Johnson's injury, represents the second analemmic crossing of the year. This is the point at which the sun crosses an imaginary line into the .666 region, or out of the .333 region, of its figure-8 course that it traces throughout the sky during the year. These crossings take place in mid-April, usually within a day or so of 13 April, and the end of August, a day or so of 30 August. The crossing in April is ritually celebrated during Easter, with Christ dying on the cross and being resurrected on the 3rd day. Stone Johnson was born 13 days after this crossing, and 13 is a number, like 3, that we will see a lot of in this video. The crossing in August, however, is ritually celebrated as the beheading of John the Baptist, with the Catholic feast day of 29 August. Stone Johnson's neck injury on 31 August, on the 3rd day, so to speak, is essentially a mirror opposite of the beheading of John the Baptist, which itself is a mirror opposite of the crucifixion of Christ, while crossing into the .333 region in April, and also the span of time from Eden until now. Hell, John the Baptist was also known as John the Forerunner, while Stone Johnson was a sprinter, or another type of runner, in the Olympics. Likewise, take note of the similarity between broken neck and beheading. This is why Stone Johnson's jersey, number 33, was ritually retired. But, like John the Baptist, Stone Johnson would himself apparently serve as the forerunner of something equally tragic. You see, the Chiefs would play one game, literally their first game as the Chiefs, and then Stone Johnson died the very next day. They would then get a week off. They would then play 9 games, and in the 3rd month, the Chief of the United States, John F. Kennedy, would be shot in the head, and the Chiefs, and all the teams for that matter, would get another week off following his tragic death. Consider, Stone Johnson was injured in the neck in a game against the Houston Oilers, a team that would finish 3rd in the AFL East in 1963, just like the Chiefs finished 3rd in the AFL West. Another 3-3. The Oilers were based in Houston, Texas, while Kennedy was killed in Dallas, Texas. The Houston Oilers' home stadium, Jeppesen Stadium, on the campus of the University of Texas, is located in the Greater 3rd Ward. So clearly, the number 3 continues to manifest. But it's not just that. Look at the incredible similarities between the deaths of Johnson and Kennedy. Being injured in the neck versus shot in the head. Kennedy dealing with chronic back pain throughout his adult life, and Johnson breaking his neck. Both incidents involving Texas. Johnson's jersey number of 33, and Kennedy being shot 33 days before Christmas, on a day and month that sum to 33. And did you know that Kennedy died on the 333rd day, inclusive, following Christmas the previous year? Stone Johnson also died 76 days prior to Kennedy, which is assumed 13, while Kennedy died at 1300 in the afternoon, with the number 13 beginning to make its presence known as well. And of course, Kennedy's vice president, who would soon become the new chief, was Lyndon Johnson, the same surname as Stone Johnson. But that's not the craziest. You see, Stone Johnson was born in Dallas, Texas, a mirror opposite of Kennedy being murdered in Dallas, Texas. Clearly, Stone Johnson was some sort of forerunner, a mirrored opposite of the ritual murder of JFK. Now, think back just a few moments ago when I told you that the AFL's first draft of their first season began on the very calendar day of JFK's murder 4 years earlier, a draft that lasted 33 rounds. Oddly coincidental, don't you think? It's almost like everything about the AFL's birth and the Chiefs' birth was preparatory to the death of the Supreme Chief, John F. Kennedy. Unfortunately, that wasn't the only tragic death that would befall a Chiefs player. You see, 119 weeks after Stone Johnson's injury, in the third year, a player named Mackley Hill tore a ligament in his right knee in a regular season game against the Buffalo Bills on 12 December 1965. On the third day, Hill underwent knee surgery at Menorah Medical Center in Kansas City. While on the operating table, his temperature suddenly spiked to 108 degrees Fahrenheit, which triggered severe convulsions. He would die 1.5 hours after surgery. The cause was said to be a sudden and massive embolism. Like Stone Johnson, Mackley Hill's jersey, number 36, would be retired. The difference between Johnson's jersey, number 33, and Hill's jersey, number 36, is 3. The date of his injury, 12 December 1965, is a summed 333, day, month, and year. And this was the 13th regular season game. And as with Stone Johnson and the 1963 season, the Chiefs would finish the 1965 season in third place. And finally, Hill died 3 calendar weeks and 1 day after JFK was murdered. 2 years, 22 days total. That's a whole lot of threes, my fellow souls. I bring focus to these two cases because, whether you accept it or not, there is an undeniable supernatural element about our existence which, as we shall continue to see, attached itself to the Chiefs from the very beginning and continued to express itself via the sacred numbers of 3 and 13. But it doesn't just involve sacred numbers. If I'm correct about the link between Stone Johnson and JFK, then there is also a link between the Kansas City Chiefs and the presidents of the United States. And of course, there's also an unmistakable fertility aspect, just as there was with Christ's murder and just as there would be 60 years later for the Chiefs. How so? The name Stone Johnson, if thought of in a crude sexual manner, refers to a rock-hard male reproductive organ. This cannot be dismissed. It means that the Chiefs are also linked to the aspect of rebirth. If that is true, did Stone Johnson die as a necessary sacrifice, symbolizing the death of the Dallas Texans football team and the birth of the Kansas City Chiefs? If so, and if Stone Johnson and JFK's deaths are linked, then Kennedy's death held the same symbolism for the United States. Please forgive my overly detailed analysis of this event, but it is absolutely critical to what we will see later. But wait, there's more. 30 months after the death of Mackley Hill, in the third year, the third death of a Chiefs player occurred. Bruce McClenagh died in an automobile accident on 18 June 1968 while serving in the Missouri National Guard. He had signed with the Kansas City Chiefs and played on the Chiefs practice squad during the 1967 season and was looking forward to more playtime as the 1968 season was preparing to begin. The truck in which McClenagh was riding was struck by a car and went into a ditch, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. An autopsy later revealed that he had died from a broken neck, just like Stone Johnson. McClenagh had also underwent knee surgery back in 1966, just like Mackley Hill was undergoing when he died. Although knee surgery is common among football players, I'm just trying to show the similarities of what came before. The accident occurred in or near Urbana, Missouri, which is located in Dallas County. Yet another reference to Dallas, Texas, to go with the Chiefs' place of birth, Stone Johnson's place of birth, and JFK's place of death. And, get this, the dates of death of Johnson, Hill, and McClenagh are very closely spaced, with 2 years, 3 months, 6 days separating Johnson's and Hill's deaths, and 2 years, 6 months, 4 days separating Hill's and McClenagh's deaths, a difference of 89 days, or very nearly 3 complete months. 3 deaths of Chiefs players within the first 5 years of the Chiefs' existence, and all seemingly linked in time by being spaced closely equidistant with only 3 months difference. Coincidence is certainly being stretched, wouldn't you say? The first Super Bowl would take place on 15 January 1967 for the 1966 season. The Chiefs won the AFL championship that year, and they played the NFL champion, the Green Bay Packers. The Chiefs lost 35-10, and they never once led during the game. But 3 years after that, the Chiefs would once again be AFL champions. Indeed, they were the final championship team for the AFL, and went on to win Super Bowl IV for the 1969 season on 11 January 1970. The AFL then merged with the NFL. Before we continue, I need to reiterate that the Chiefs were named after a political leader. As such, I have to question whether or not they were functioning as some form of political prognosticators, an oracle by any other name. Think about it. Their first Super Bowl appearance in the very first Super Bowl, although a loss, seemed to reflect the continued fate of the murder of John F. Kennedy. For example, they won their very first game as the Chiefs, 59-7 over the Denver Broncos, looking very much like their former selves, the Dallas Texans, when they won the AFL championship the year before, in their third year of life. But then they endured the death of Stone Johnson, and then 2 more deaths, roughly equidistant in time, all throughout the Johnson administration, almost as if the deaths were functioning as a constant reminder that their beloved chief was murdered in a coup, and that the chief in office at the time had very likely played a role in it. It was only after Johnson left the presidency that the Chiefs would win their first Super Bowl in the 1969 season. But did their win in the first year of Nixon's reign actually portend his eventual downfall and the theft of his crown? You see, in the third year, the next coup would begin with the break-in of the Watergate complex. Indeed, this was precisely 888 days after Super Bowl IV. In an amazing coincidence, Nixon would announce his resignation on 8/8 of 74. I contend that the Chiefs' true presence, either by a Chiefs player or players dying, or by winning in the Super Bowl, portends the coming theft of a crown. And this is why the Chiefs would not return to another Super Bowl for 50 years. Because there were no more presidential coups, right? But wait, what about the election debacle in 2000 between George Bush and Al Gore when the Supreme Court decided the election? Couldn't that also be seen as a coup? Think about it, my fellow souls. The Chiefs could have made it to the playoffs in the 1999 season, but they lost by 3 points in their final game to the Oakland Raiders. They finished second in the standings. But that game was bittersweet for another reason. You see, it turned out to be the final game for Chiefs linebacker Derek Thomas. 3 weeks and 1 day later, he would become involved in an automobile accident in snow and ice while heading to the Kansas City airport. He ended up being paralyzed from the chest down and dying from an embolism 17 days later. Doesn't this paralysis sound a lot like Stone Johnson and Bruce McClenna's broken necks? And doesn't the embolism recall the death of Mackley Hill? Derek Thomas was 33 years old, and his jersey number was 58, with 5 plus 8 equaling 13. Again, these numbers just keep appearing. As such, I argue that a chief did indeed foretell the coup that would occur later that year. Recently, the Chiefs just experienced their 5th appearance in a Super Bowl in 6 seasons on 9 February 2025. If they could have won that game, they would have achieved what no NFL team has ever accomplished: win 3 Super Bowls in a row, a three-peat. It should have happened, especially since the number 3 had figured so prominently in their early success, and how it seemed to dominate their later life. In particular, Super Bowl 58. This is that story, and what may have gone wrong, at least from my rather unique perspective. In what follows, we will see a great deal of instances of the numbers 3 and 13. The Chiefs returned to the Super Bowl in the 2019 season, coincidentally with the beginning of COVID-19. Indeed, Super Bowl 54 was held on 2 February 2020, the date itself a numeric palindrome, which was the 33rd day of the year. This was the Chiefs' 3rd Super Bowl appearance, and of course, the digital root of the season year 2019 is 3. But that's not all. February the 2nd is also Groundhog Day. Groundhog Day is held on the 33rd day of the year because it represents both the overt midpoint of winter and it refers to the sacred occult crossing between the 3rd part and the 2 parts. Hence Christ dying on the cross at 33, similar in application to the analemma noted above. You see, 66 days in the future from Groundhog Day leads us to within a few days of the first analemic crossing of the year in mid-April. According to the Bible, the number 33 is related to the feminine, while the number 66 is related to the masculine, elements defining the 3rd part and the 2 parts from the law of birthright. The masculine is related to the soul and the sun god, while the feminine is related to the physical and the moon. So when the groundhog sees its shadow, it means that the time of the sun is still active and in control, hence 6 more weeks of winter. If it doesn't see its shadow, the sun has gone to sleep and the moon can rise early. Likewise, February the 2nd is also the 39th day after Christmas, the traditional birth of Christ, with 39 being the number of weeks of the typical gestation period of a human fetus. Here we have 3 things: the law of birthright, the birth of Christ, and the number defining a human fetus, now pointing to birth or rebirth. What does any of this have to do with the Chiefs, you ask? The official groundhog, Punxsutawney Phil, didn't see his shadow in 2020. This symbolically meant that the dark time of the moon was at hand, hence things like coronavirus to represent a solar eclipse, when the moon steals the light or the corona of the sun, and in particular the crown of the orange man. I recommend you watch my video on Trump in the description to truly understand the symbolism of COVID. But it also meant that without the sun, the Chiefs could win for the first time in 50 years. This is, unfortunately, an inescapable truth. However, if they were able to win, and if my earlier supposition regarding their true purpose was correct, they would become the harbingers of doom, predicting the theft of Trump's crown. As it turned out, the Chiefs would go on to win their third Super Bowl appearance when they decisively defeated the San Francisco 49ers 31-20 in Super Bowl 54. Later that year, Trump lost his crown. The Chiefs would make it back to the Super Bowl the next year as well. They played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, going up against the amazing Tom Brady as quarterback. Sadly, the Kansas City Chiefs looked uncharacteristically pitiful. Not just bad, incredibly bad. Pathetic, actually. Everything went wrong. Watching that game, I remember feeling that something was off. Something was not right. Not just with their playing, either. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something dark involved. Now, you can believe that or not. I don't really care. But to me, it was almost like they were playing against something that they couldn't see, and they lost 31-9. So what went wrong? Well, apparently, they ran into someone with better juju. That's not a joke. A 2021 article, which directly referenced an earlier CBS Sports article from 2019, may offer an explanation. The author bluntly asked whether the witchcraft practiced by Tom Brady's wife at the time contributed to him and his team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, winning Super Bowl 55 that year. The article mentioned Brady using special altars, magic stones, and mantras to summon the super juju. After Tom Brady and the Patriots won Super Bowl 53, his wife, Gisele Bündchen, reportedly told him, "You're lucky you married a witch. I'm just a good witch." Witchcraft, huh? That would certainly explain the dumbfounded looks on the faces of the Chiefs players that game. But does their losing fit my theory about the Chiefs being omens of coups or stolen crowns? Yes, it does. Joe Biden took power just weeks beforehand, and nobody tried to take it away. The Chiefs did not make it back to the Super Bowl for the 2021 season, but they did return for the 2022 season. They won Super Bowl 57 on 12 February 2023, a summed date with a digital root of 3, by 3 points, 38-35, against the Philadelphia Eagles. But Super Bowl 57 should tentatively destroy my crazy dark omen theory for the Chiefs, right? After all, why did they win? Nobody tried to take the presidency away that year, right? Or did they? Think back to Biden's terrible cognitive decline, and all the crazy body doubles, and the fact that most of his orders were conveniently signed by AutoPen. Who was actually running the government by 2023? If my theory is correct, the Chiefs' win would suggest someone else had taken over and Biden was simply a doddering figurehead. The next year, Super Bowl 58 was held on 11 February 2024 in Paradise, Nevada, The chosen participants were the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs. I say chosen because, as a longtime Chiefs fan, something just didn't feel right to me throughout the playoffs, and especially during the Super Bowl. Something was glaringly out of place, and I don't know how else to describe it. Perhaps I have gotten so used to recognizing manufactured events that I was sadly seeing it on display again, but I didn't want to believe it. It's a game, after all. How can you fake a game? There are just too many variables in play, unless the players themselves are actively involved. Even then, it's still very difficult to fake gameplay and make it look believable. But there are other ways, quite unbelievable and questionable ways, that don't require direct player involvement to manipulate the outcome of such events. Like maybe witchcraft or other dark arts. Sound crazy? Well, consider what we witnessed and how those crazy threes clustered around this event. Like the previous year when the Chiefs won, the sum date of the game had a digital root of 3, the Chiefs' lucky number. The very first score from both sides was a field goal, which yields 3 points. The Chiefs won by 3 points, 25-22. When Travis Kelce shoved Coach Reed, the Chiefs were down by 3 points, 3-zip. I also believe that this was in the 3rd minute of the second quarter. The Chiefs were down 10-3 at halftime. The Chiefs took the lead for the first time in the game in the 3rd quarter. From that point, the score seesawed back and forth for the rest of regulation play, always being either tied or never varying by other than 3 points. Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker forced overtime with a 29-yard field goal with 3 seconds left to make the score 19-19. The final play was a 3-yard touchdown reception with 3 seconds left on the clock in the first quarter of overtime when the game ended. Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes threw for 333 yards. The address of Allegiant Stadium, where the Super Bowl was held, is 3333 Al Davis Way. Allegiant Stadium opened on 31 July 2020, just 13 days shy of the full 33 months following its groundbreaking on 13 November 2017, and in the 3rd year. Super Bowl 58 took place 3 years after the new stadium opened. I mean, some of that can be manipulated, but winning by 3 points with a 3-yard touchdown and 3 seconds left on the clock, while Mahomes threw for 333 yards? Isn't that pushing mere happenstance just a tad? It's either a massive coincidence, or there was something supernatural going on there. With Super Bowl 58, what ultimately cemented this proposed dark or deal with the devil possibility for me was seeing a rabid Travis Kelce, tight end for the Chiefs, scream at Coach Andy Reid and send him off balance early in the game. Kelce should have been ejected immediately. People get arrested for this type of behavior. Instead, this action was blown off, especially after the game. Fans tried to downplay the devilry. Oh, they're just friends. He was just being competitive. Well, friends don't treat other friends like that, especially those much older. Andy Reid, likewise, made a point of claiming it was nothing. Yeah, well, look at the video of Kelce's face, my fellow souls. It was dark and demonic, filled with hatred and bile. I know, you're not convinced. But if such an incredible claim was true, and the Chiefs did indeed lose in 2021 because of witchcraft, the mirror, the theoretical process that I coined in my books and contend keeps everything in balance in the universe, would demand that the Chiefs' loss in 2021 be balanced, be avenged, if you will. In other words, witchcraft, or some other form of supernatural subterfuge, would be employed to work on the Chiefs' behalf to ensure their victory 3 years later. Note our special number again. Think of it like an election, two forms of evil vying to win. Indeed, while it sounds crazy, we do have a mix of biblical and satanic imagery in play here. How so? Just like with the death of Christ requiring one full day of death, when the Chiefs were crucified in 2021 for the 2020 season, they never returned to the Super Bowl the next year. However, they did return in the third year, and they beat the Philadelphia Eagles, just like Christ was resurrected on the third day. And take note of that team, my fellow souls. The Philadelphia Eagles would also take a year off from the Super Bowl and return in the third year to beat the Chiefs in return. Let's assume for a moment that those words spoken by Tom Brady's wife were accurate, and that she was indeed a good witch. As stated, the mirror would naturally demand that the roles eventually reverse and the other side have their day to obtain balance. 3 full years later, again, note that number 3, the mirrored opposites of the witchcraft game in 2021 arrived with Super Bowl 58. This time, it wasn't a matter of simply chanting mantras or building an altar or employing magic stones. This time, it seems that there perhaps may have been some evil satanic shenanigans at play involving blood. And just like before, the mirror would demand that the root source be a male and female couple. However, since roles reverse in mirrored events, this time the dark power couple would not be married, as we will later see. What do I mean by blood? As it so happens, there were 3 male Chiefs fans who had gathered at a friend's house for the very last regular season game of 2023 between the Chiefs and the LA Chargers. The Chiefs won that game by 1 point, scoring a total of 13 points. Tragically, those 3 friends were found 2 days later, or in Bible speak, on the third day, on 9 January 2024, in the backyard of a friend's home, frozen to death. Later preliminary toxicology results stated that all of the bodies had cocaine, marijuana, and a lethal dose of fentanyl. Few, if any, believe the official narrative provided by authorities, with the Kansas City police repeatedly stating that the case was 100% not being investigated as a homicide. But why not? Their initial working of the crime scene has been described by some commentators as being extremely shoddy, for example, leaving evidence behind. Few answers were forthcoming, which is usually what happens when the Freemasonic Brotherhood gets involved to quell a story. Indeed, families were still being ignored by authorities a year later. Even though the cause of death was finalized on 31 January 2024, it hadn't officially been released to the families of the victims or the public because it was still an active investigation. Well, if it was 100% not being investigated as a homicide, what was active about it? It is my personal opinion that this was a deliberate delaying tactic. But why? What were they hiding, and why did they need to delay? A little later, we will review the most recent information which prompted this more in-depth update. Given what we know about the dark arts, I believe that the 3 men who died were part of a satanic ritual meant to bless each of the 2 playoff games and the conference championship game to come. You see, these 3 men were found precisely 33 days prior to the Super Bowl, thus cementing the 3 and 33 firmly in this event, just like all the other 3s. But they weren't the only deaths related to the Chiefs. On 4 June 2023, the beloved First Lady of Football, Norma Hunt, wife of Chiefs founder Lamar Hunt Sr., passed away at the age of 85. At the time of her death, Norma was the only female member of the Never Miss a Super Bowl club, having attended all 57 games to that point. In honor of her, all throughout the 2023 regular and postseason, the Chiefs sported remembrances of Norma Hunt on their jerseys, which were her initials, NKH. But it gets better. Norma Hunt died precisely 33 weeks prior to the divisional playoff game against the Buffalo Bills, a game in which the Chiefs inexplicably won by 3 points. I say inexplicably because the Bills had the opportunity to tie that game with 1 minute and 47 seconds left on the clock, with a 44-yard field goal attempt that ultimately missed to the right. It was like an invisible hand reached out and tugged the football off course. I honestly could not believe it. In any event, this was precisely 3 weeks prior to Super Bowl 58. If my theory is correct about the 3 male Chiefs fans being satanic sacrifices for the playoffs and the championship game, what was the needed sacrifice for the Super Bowl game itself? Well, in perfect mirror fashion, that sacrifice took place afterward. After the Chiefs' victory in the Super Bowl, the city of Kansas City held the obligatory parade, which just happened to be on Valentine's Day. As the event was nearing its completion, however, a scuffle between several black youths erupted and shots were fired. This took place at Kansas City's Union Station, the very same location where the 2023 draft was held. Multiple injuries were reported, 22, and one woman, a radio DJ, was tragically killed. This was 3 days after the Super Bowl. So here we have yet another tragedy, this time after the Super Bowl and involving a single female who died instead of 3 males. Another 1-3 or 3-1, however you want to look at it. And occurring 3 days later instead of 33 days prior. In essence, the 2023 football season ended where it began, and it included a murder. A mirror opposite to the way their very first game way back in 1963 experienced the death of a player the next day. And still the number 3 or 33 dominated. Doesn't this sound just a tad dark? Doesn't this sound like something that might be satanic or even the product of witchcraft? But how? As we mentioned earlier, Tom Brady was the quarterback for the New England Patriots for 2 decades, and then for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for his final 3 years. His jersey number at both teams was 12, which sums to 3. His wife at the time, Gisele Bündchen, was a self-described good witch. She provided Mr. Brady with rituals to perform before his games. She also would tell him when he would win and when he would lose. Now, whether you believe any of this is ultimately irrelevant. All that matters is that they believed it. We each have the power to manifest our own reality. Brady and Bündchen were the paranormal power pair of their own reality. Sadly, they were divorced in 2022 after 13 years of marriage. Like the number 3, it is a very common number in this analysis, as we will soon see. 3 months after Norma Hunt died, a new First Lady of Football arrived, Taylor Swift, when she began dating Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce. Both were 33 at the time. It's my belief that this is where the new paranormal power pair enters the narrative to offset the Tom Brady-Gisele Bündchen witchcraft couple. You see, Taylor Swift adores special numbers. They are everything to her, especially the number 13. It's her favorite number. There is at least one video floating about the interweb in which she brags about being born on the 13th. turning 13 on Friday the 13th, having her first album reach gold in 13 weeks. Her first #1 song had a 13-second intro. And that whenever she's won an award, she's always been seated in the 13th row. She has stated that numbers rule her world. On 4 February 2024, just 1 week before the Super Bowl, Swift won her 13th Grammy. And of course, she goes out of her way to specifically schedule things to occur based on sacred numbers or auspicious dates. For example, in the 2023 season, she specifically planned things so that she would carefully attend 13 games, no more, no less, consisting of 9 regular season and the 4 postseason games. Swift's love interest is Travis Kelce. His rookie year for the Chiefs was 2013, and he was drafted in the 3rd round. As you can see, the numbers 13 and 3 played a defining role in his beginning with the Chiefs. He is the other half of the amazing Mahomes-Kelce duo. They each have the uncanny ability to read each other and perform amazing plays. In 2023, Kelce reportedly accepted $20 million to become Pfizer's latest vaccine whore, or snake oil salesman. This action directly seeks to link us back to the COVID-19 scamdemic and its origins in 2017, as we will later see. Could this have been the moment when Kelce may have sold his soul to the devil? Immediately prior to Super Bowl 58, Taylor Swift was in Tokyo, Japan, for a series of concerts. She reportedly made a mad dash 13-hour flight to Las Vegas to be in time for the big game. Japan is known as the land of the rising sun, and it is located along the Ring of Fire. The latter is the location where 90% of the earthquakes and some of the largest volcanoes to have ever erupted reside. Interestingly, a solar eclipse produces its own ring of fire during totality, called the corona, which I link to the coronavirus in my video series on the symbolism of Donald Trump. In any event, from a symbolic perspective, in order to reach the game, Swift had to fly east in an attempt to reach the rising sun. Similarly, Lucifer is known as the morning star or the light bringer. So, in essence, from a purely symbolic standpoint, Swift went to the land of the rising sun, the only nation nuked in a war thus far, and brought back the sacred light of division from the splitting of the atom, Lucy's light, to the game. And technically, she even brought that light back through time to the game, as she crossed the international dateline to get there. Never ignore the symbolism, and there is certainly a massive amount of symbolism by this action alone. While there seems to be no end of interviews with Kelce's family regarding how normal and down-to-earth Taylor Swift acted around them, the sad fact of the matter is that her friends, seated with her during the Super Bowl, were making what some would call satanic gestures and were adorned with upside-down crosses. Was it totally innocent, or was there, perhaps, a darker purpose? As someone who has investigated this kind of stuff for decades, it smells of the typical Freemasonic Judaic fertility ritual. If that's the case, Kelce and Swift are merely the latest token pair stepping into the role of Adam and Eve to usher in the replacement for mankind. If this is the case, if it is indeed a massive fertility ritual, we need to return to that point in time when Allegiant Stadium, site of Super Bowl 58, was conceived in 2017. As mentioned, construction on Allegiant Stadium began in late 2017. There was a whole host of incredible events that occurred that turbulent year. For example, we had Trump's first inauguration, We had the Great Eclipse, a huge contributor to the fertility aspect. We had the Las Vegas shooting. And we had the totally ignored beginnings of COVID-19, all taking place in 2017. And believe it or not, they are all linked. First of all, as revealed in my ongoing video series on the symbolism of Donald Trump, in the 33rd week of the year, and 30 weeks and 3 days after Trump's inauguration, we experienced the Great Eclipse over the continental United States. This is important for the incredible symbolism it reveals. You see, in a solar eclipse, the moon steals the light of the sun, especially its crown or corona. If you remember, Trump was and is derogatorily labeled the Orange Man by the media. And in my books and videos, I claim he is reprising the role of Christ as an anti- or reflective Christ. In other words, he was playing the role of the sun, not just the Son of God, but the sun up in the sky. This event occurred in the first year of his presidency. In the last year of his first presidency, a mysterious coronavirus would materialize, and, as expected, the Orange Man's crown would be stolen, just like the light of the orange sun was stolen as he stupidly looked up without protective glasses and watched, and just like darkness blanketed the land during the crucifixion of Christ when his crown was stolen. None of us knew at the time that we were seeing his future. Beginnings and endings, mirror events. The elite oligarchs know all about the mirror, and they were giving us all a preview of events they were planning. Again, an elaborate fertility ritual was taking place, which, believe it or not, was centered around replaying the crucifixion of Christ with an ignorant Trump, the monarch of the moment. Now, consider what we have seen and ponder the role that the chief symbolically played in not just predicting, but actually installing a retooled chief. The Great Eclipse of 2017 had the moon stealing the light, the corona or crown, from the orange sun. In 2020, the same thing happened to Trump with the invention of the coronavirus, a plague specifically designed to steal the corona/crown from the Orange Man. Then, 4 years later, we have Taylor Swift swiftly traveling from the land of the rising sun, again the only nation nuked in a war, to bring back the sacred light of division to Super Bowl 58 in 2024. The very year that Trump would be reelected and the crown of sacred light returned. She essentially played Lucifer, the light bringer, bringing the dark light, for lack of a better word. Trump was reelected in the 39th week. 39 is the number of birth or rebirth, as it refers to the typical gestation period of a human fetus. It's a key number of man. Unfortunately, if my theory is correct about a Chiefs Super Bowl win predicting a stolen crown, then that would mean that Trump's win was just as much of a coup as was Biden's. Did everything I reveal collectively conspire to return him to office after being suitably equipped with the dark light? Was it Trump, perhaps, that made the deal with the devil? Yeah, I know, you are skeptical, but we're not done yet. So how did COVID start in 2017, and how are events that year linked to the Chiefs? First, Moderna's patent for the COVID-19 spike protein sequence was approved in the third month of 2017, 13 days prior to spring. And second, 333 days after Trump took office, on 19 December 2017, news outlets reported that government officials with the National Institutes of Health had lifted a ban on funding research into making pathogens more lethal, i.e., gain-of-function research. The the decision specifically lifted a funding pause put in place 3 years earlier, another 3, on experimenting with the viruses influenza, severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, and Middle East respiratory syndrome, MERS, and yet another set of 3. This was in Anthony Fauci's 33rd year as head of NIAID at NIH. Yep, those 3s just continue to pile up, don't they? But don't worry, I'm assured it's just a coincidence. If you want to learn more about this, check out part 2 of my video series on Trump. 42 days after the Great Eclipse, the Las Vegas shooting took place, and then 43 days after that, the groundbreaking for Allegiant Stadium took place on 13 November 2017. And, coincidentally, it just happened to take place 43 days prior to Christmas. Not only that, it strangely took place at 1900 in the evening, after sunset. More precisely, it took place 147 minutes after sunset, if my research is correct. How many groundbreaking ceremonies have you ever seen that took place after dark? Darkness is the time when the moon typically rules, and usually is indicative of a dark or otherwise satanic influence. Darkness is the time when we do things we wouldn't normally do in the light of day. Those 147 minutes from sunset to the start of the groundbreaking are divisible by 3, 49 times. Does that number seemingly foretell one of the future participants to the very first Super Bowl that the Allegiant Stadium would eventually host 6 years later, the San Francisco 49ers? Hold that thought for a second. In the 13th week since the Las Vegas shooting, one of the construction workers working on the new Allegiant Stadium allegedly buried a Kansas City Chiefs Kingdom flag where they believed the 50-yard line would be, and it was supposedly encased in concrete. A news article and Facebook post went viral at the time and had many Raiders fans very upset. A horribly written follow-up article from just before Super Bowl 58 seemed to deny that it was ever buried. Either way, there was a Facebook post on this incident, or lack thereof, and a subsequent news article from Las Vegas back in December of 2017 that served to uncannily identify the other team in the future Super Bowl that would be hosted at that particular stadium. In perfect mirror fashion, both participants were now identified, one overtly, the Chiefs, and one covertly, the 49ers, more than 6 years beforehand. One is linked to the moon, the Chiefs, as the flag was buried in the dark, while the other represents the sun, the 49ers, being associated with the number of minutes after sunset, and linked to San Francisco, which is named for St. Francis of Assisi, a man who reportedly was the first to bear the bleeding wounds of Christ, known as stigmata, and who was credited with the creation of the nativity scene, thus effectively telegraphing the birth and death of Christ. Remember that the Chiefs started winning Super Bowls when COVID arrived in the election year of 2020, when Trump's crown was stolen, and Super Bowl 58 took place in the very year when Trump would see his crown returned. Mirror echoes. Plus, Travis Kelce was reportedly paid $20 million to pimp the shots. The Chiefs would then lose the following year when Trump became the first sitting president to attend a Super Bowl. Trump was the new representative of the retooled sun, whose light was now of a dark and divided nature, having been brought back from Japan, the only nation nuked in a war, by Taylor Swift when she played Lucifer. As you can see, the Las Vegas shooting took place at the virtual midpoint between the eclipse and the stadium groundbreaking. Likewise, the stadium groundbreaking took place at the precise midpoint between the Las Vegas shooting and Christmas. Why? It is my belief that the shooting itself was staged by the elite as a necessary blood sacrifice to bless their future endeavors, specifically the future COVID scamdemic that would steal Trump's crown, and then to consecrate the creation of a massive round stadium to eventually serve as an altar, introduce the next solar eclipse over the United States, and return Trump's crown to him with alterations. Consider that the attendees of the Harvest Festival were shot from above from a gold-clad building in the shape of a trinity to reference the heavens, in particular the sun/sun, while the coronavirus, itself linked to the solar corona stolen by the moon during an eclipse, led to people being shot in a different manner, with a vax, lest they die. The number of deaths that took place at the time, 58, pointed to the very Super Bowl that Allegiant Stadium would eventually host, although several other deaths linked to the shooting would occur over the subsequent years. That means that in 2017, we knew the particular Super Bowl number and the future participants that would eventually play in the very stadium that was being constructed. I know, it's just a coincidence. As I reported earlier, construction on Allegiant Stadium was completed on 31 July 2020, just 13 days shy of a full 33 months following its groundbreaking on 13 November 2017, and in the third year. This was also 33 weeks following the announcement from Wuhan, China, of a strange viral outbreak on 12 December 2019 that would eventually become COVID-19. That date, 12 December 2019, is a summed 333 day, month, and year, and the very same calendar day that the Chiefs' Mac Lee Hill became injured in 1965, 54 years earlier, which itself is the number of the third Super Bowl that the Chiefs would play. Mac Lee Hill became injured 13 months and 3 days prior to the very first Super Bowl. Those special numbers just keep showing up. Ultimately, both the stadium and COVID-19 shared the same conception in 2017, and the same time of birth, relatively speaking, around 2020. But why link a stadium with the scamdemic? If I'm correct, the entire point of Allegiant Stadium was to host Super Bowl 58 on the 58th day prior to the second great eclipse over the United States on 8 April 2024. That latter day and month was precisely 33 calendar weeks after 21 August, the date of the great eclipse in 2017. Something that can only take place in a leap year, which 2024 was, with the 2017 eclipse itself taking place in the 33rd week of the year. What are the odds, my fellow souls, of two eclipses taking place over the continental United States, forming a cross over the center of the country, with the first taking place 33 weeks into the year, and the second taking place 33 calendar weeks later? They have to be staggering. In any event, the Super Bowl itself needed to be in place to usher in the return of the crown to Trump, so that he could finish the role of Antichrist and lead the Christian nation to the crucifixion. A crucifixion at 33. Again, see my videos on the symbolism of Trump if you want to learn more. Now, let's do a deeper dive into this hypothetical fertility aspect. What was the primary purpose of Allegiant Stadium? To be the home field for the Las Vegas Raiders and the UNLV Rebels football teams, right? Ergo, it is to be used for football. That's the key. How so? A solar eclipse occurs when one divine circle in the sky overlaps another divine circle in the sky. In essence, they join with each other. They merge. They can even be said to procreate. When two circles overlap, They briefly create a shape known as the womb of the universe. Known as the Vesica Piscis, everything in existence springs from its ubiquitous form. Indeed, it is one of the oldest symbols known to man and a universal symbol of fertility. The Vesica Piscis, or Pisces, is formed by two identical circles overlapping each other so that the center of each lay on the other's circumference. Symbolically, the intersection of each circle depicts the union of the feminine and masculine energies, while the shape that emerges from these overlapping energies results in the product of their union, the sacred divine child. This particular shape just happens to be in the form of a fish, when euphemistically used by Christianity, or the feminine vulva. Of course, it also just happens to match the look of a football. Are you paying attention now? Within the area of the Vesica Piscis, you can have 4 equal circular segments and either 2 equilateral triangles or 4 right triangles. One segment and one equilateral triangle represents a sector, 1/6 of a circle, 60 degrees. It is a cornerstone of modern geometry, one of the most important aspects, at least for the terms of this presentation, lay in the height-to-width ratio of the overlapping divine child symbol itself. It is precisely 265/153, or 1.7320261, which is, essentially, the square root of the number 3. Yet again, the number 3 rises to prominence. What's also interesting with that ratio is that Vesica Piscis literally means bladder of a fish, and 153 is the exact number of fish Jesus was miraculously said to have caught in the Gospel of John. As I repeatedly state in my books, the Bible is a science textbook, couched as parable and metaphor. Now, consider the sacred form of the Vesica Piscis, the womb of the universe, and how the shape of the overlapping circles creates the divine child in the guise of a football, and apply it to the game of football itself. It's all about protecting the ball, isn't it? Sort of like it was a tiny infant. Or perhaps it's the chosen sacred seed necessary to bring about the tiny infant. It's all about trying to invade the territory of the opposing team so that the seed can be implanted and score. The only thing needed is for the ball itself to cross an imaginary line in the end zone. The whole thing seems to be about the intense battle of semen to be the one player to reach the sacred egg so that rebirth can occur. Crossing the imaginary line is analogous to the sperm penetrating the egg. Even the uprights in the end zones seem to mimic a woman's legs when having sex or giving birth. And of course, the teams themselves are ranked as seed. Ponder carefully, my fellow souls, just exactly what we have been programmed to love. If there is one sport people seem to love as much as sex, it is football. Now you know why. It is designed to mimic sex. When coupled with the perfection of the golden ratio and the numbers in play, 5, 8, and 3, the fertility aspect of this particular game, Super Bowl 58, becomes quite apparent. Super Bowl 58 was played 11 February 2024. February the 11th is the 42nd day of the year, just like the Las Vegas shooting took place on the 42nd day after the Great Eclipse of 2017. That date was also 3.53 years after the stadium opening. Or, stated another way, 42 months and 11 days after the opening. Yeah, the 42nd day of the year and 42 months after opening, to harken back to the Las Vegas shooting on the 42nd day after the eclipse. I'm sure it was all just a crazy coincidence. But here's the really haunting aspect of this. There are 57 complete days between Super Bowl 58 and the solar eclipse on 8 April 2024. If you remember, Mackley Hill's injury back in 1965 took place precisely 57 weeks prior to Super Bowl I. So what, you ask? He was a chief, analogous to a king, and his name was Hill. What famous king died on a hill when the sky darkened? That's right, Christ. Consider, during surgery on the third day, Hill's temperature suddenly spiked to 108 degrees Fahrenheit. It's the mirror opposite of an eclipse, when the light is taken. The roles reversed. Instead of cooling, there was heat. But yet the story still played the same. Hill's light, his life, was taken in a manner similar to Christ, and the manner the light is taken from the sun during a solar eclipse. Indeed, the entire sequence of events was reversed. The eclipse in the past, realized as Hill's death, took place beforehand, separated by a span of 57, and then Super Bowl I would occur, which the Chiefs would play, but lose, while in the future, Super Bowl 58 would occur first, the Chiefs would win, and the eclipse would occur 57 full days later. The same sequence of events was replaying again, with Hill in the role of the one being eclipsed. Somehow, both events became inescapably tied together. Then, of course, there was Mackley Hill's death before the first Super Bowl, and Stone Johnson's death after the first Chiefs game. These two are mirror opposites, and, like Hill, Johnson was linked to Christ via his link to Kennedy. When included with my other research, it is very likely that Hill's death was the result of the Chiefs' victory in Super Bowl 58, 58 years into the future. As unbelievable as this sounds, these are how the mirrors in time work, and such action is scientifically feasible. And if this did indeed happen, it shows just how critically important the events in 2024 were. Hill's death could have been an echo, like being blown off your feet from an explosion a block away, from the future events that were radiating both into the future and into the past from their origination point in 2024. I have several such examples in my books, but I digress, and you are very likely ready to stop listening to such absolute insanity anyway, if you haven't already. In any event, given the overt fertility aspect of football and the Vesica Piscis, is it any wonder there is so much occult symbolism on display during the halftime shows at a Super Bowl? The halftime show for Super Bowl 58 was no different. It featured the music of Usher, someone who was rising to stardom in the late 90s and early 2000s. Of course, that was several decades ago. Why not have someone more contemporary do their show instead of Usher? Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that he has multiple tattoos on his body, particularly his head, devoted to sacred geometry. Indeed, he even has an all-seeing eye of providence tattooed under his chin. And of course, it may also have something to do with his name, Usher. Like maybe this particular event, this satanic Super Bowl, was meant to usher in something very dark. Was it foretelling the return of a crown for an Antichrist, Trump, and the associated destruction of the Christian nation, and by extension, Christianity itself? Think about it, my fellow souls. An even older country star from an earlier generation, Reba McEntire, was tasked with singing the national anthem to open the game. Reba secured her first recording contract way back in 1975 and is known as the Queen of Country. With her flowing red hair and her thick southern accent, I can't help but get the impression of Eve in Eden. If correct, this tends to take us back to the beginning of the Bible. Reba is short for the Hebrew Rebecca, and generally means to tie or bind, something women naturally provide for our souls, the ability to bind or anchor them to a body. Her last name, McIntyre, seems to refer to the son of all or everyone, the entirety of mankind, of which Eve was the mother. One possible meaning of her complete name could be the queen who binds us all. Intriguingly, McIntyre's TV series, Reba, began just 3 weeks and 3 days after the events of 11 September 2001. Yep, another 3-3. Here we go again. The beginning was sung by Reba, which takes us back to Eden. The halftime show takes us to some midpoint, which ushers in the end. A white female portraying Eve, who took the sacred knowledge by eating the forbidden fruit, becomes a black male sporting esoteric secrets in tattoos. A literal darkening and mirroring of the soul has taken place. Perhaps Usher's all-seeing eye tattoo actually references the United States itself, since the eye is a major part of its iconography. And finally, the end of the game has Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift hugging on each other and representing what? A new beginning with a brainwashed and compliant youth? An ending in which the elite, the chiefs, are victorious and cheering crowds lauding their greatness? Or is it cheering the return of one particular chief, a president that, himself, is uncontrollably playing the role of Christ? Check out my other video series on the symbolism of Donald Trump. And this brings us back to Taylor Swift. Just like the number 3 would define the Chiefs' existence, Taylor Swift's favorite number, 13, would seem to dominate Super Bowl 58. Consider the Super Bowl number and the number of people initially who died in the Las Vegas shooting, 58, sums to 13. The number 49 of the 49ers sums to 13. The 49ers quarterback, Brock Purdy, wears jersey number 13. The day and month of the Super Bowl, 11 February, sums to 13. The Chiefs took the lead in the third quarter of the game when the score was 13-10. During overtime of Super Bowl 58, both teams had 13 plays each. The day of the groundbreaking for Allegiant Stadium was the 13th. In the 13th week following the Las Vegas shooting, one of the construction workers working on the new Allegiant Stadium allegedly buried a Kansas City Chiefs Kingdom flag where they believed the 50-yard line would be. The address of Allegiant Stadium was changed to 3333 Al Davis Way. Al Davis was the coach and former owner of the Las Vegas Raiders, who died in 2011. Interestingly, Super Bowl 58 was played in the 13th year following his death. The day Allegiant Stadium opened, 31, is a mirror of 13. This was 13 days shy of the full 33 months since the groundbreaking. Playoffs for the 2023 NFL season began 13 January 2024. The 2023 championship games for both the NFC and AFC were played by opposing teams that were rated 1 seed and 3 seed to collectively produce 13. The very same thing happened at the Super Bowl. The opposing teams were 1 seed and 3 seed. The Chiefs had 11 consecutive winning seasons leading up to the Super Bowl 58 that began in 2013. Since all of this seems to link back to the Great Eclipse, 13 is the number of orbits around the Earth that the Moon makes in an Earth year. And since women were designed to laud the Moon, while men laud the Sun, 13 is naturally the number of typical menstrual cycles per year. This links back to the fertility aspect. And mentioned previously, for February 2024, just 1 week before the Super Bowl, Swift won her 13th Grammy, and she had a 13-hour flight from Japan to get to the game. Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen were the paranormal power pair of their own reality who may have influenced the outcome of past Super Bowls. Sadly, the Brady and Bündchen power pair ended when they were divorced in 2022 after 13 years of marriage. Precisely 13 weeks after the Super Bowl, on 12 May 2024, Taylor Swift performed the 87th concert of her Eras Tour in Nanterre, France, a suburb of Paris. The first item of note, and most blatant, was the fact that Travis Kelce was present at this concert. Kelce's jersey number, playing for the Chiefs, is 87, a number divisible by 3, 29 times. 87 is also 13 short of 100, or 13% short. Swift came out on stage during the 1989 segment of the show, wearing an outfit of red and gold, the Chiefs' colors. It is said that the album 1989 is Kelce's favorite. Since this was precisely 13 weeks after the Super Bowl, and 13 is Swift's favorite number, and since this was the fourth and final concert at Nanterre, and there were 4 postseason games in 2024 for the Chiefs, it would stand to reason that this particular date was meant to reference the Super Bowl. But why? Well, if that date and the concert number were so carefully chosen, so too was the location. In other words, somebody was giving us a broader message. Swift's concert was held at the La Défense Arena in Nanterre. La Défense is named after a famous sculpture that commemorates the siege of Paris during the Franco-Prussian War of 1870 to 1871. As would be expected for this investigation, the number 3 is forefront, with the sculpture featuring 3 figures. Foremost among them is a brave woman standing proud and defiant in the uniform of the National Guard. She is brandishing a sword and wearing a crown, as if she is a queen. The official excuse is that she represents Paris itself. Let me just say that I find that explanation rather dubious at best. Then there is a male soldier that seems to be hiding behind her, reaching into his pouch to load his gun. And finally, there is a sad young woman behind. I find it ironic that Swift would choose to honor her boyfriend in an arena named La Défense when Kelce is a member of the offensive line. But let's just keep that fact and the strong queen in the sculpture in the back of our minds for now. Nanterre, France is unique in that it may have represented the earliest settlement of what eventually became Paris. Nanterre means enduring sacred shrine or place. Someone wants us to know that origins are at the heart of the message. This can somewhat be confirmed by the fact that Paris used to be the home of the prime meridian for the world, before it was moved 2.333 degrees west. Just as Paris essentially splits France down the middle, it also split the world down the middle, with the longitude being set at 0 degrees. The Paris meridian is still believed by some to remain the esoteric or occult meridian used by secret societies like the Freemasons behind the scenes. In other words, it adeptly represents division, or the division of the world. So, Taylor Swift not only symbolically brought back the sacred light of division, the splitting of the atom, when she played Lucifer the Lightbringer and made a mad dash from Japan to Las Vegas in time for Super Bowl 58. But precisely 13 weeks later, she would also be in the very city that served the role of division for the world with the Paris Meridian. In this case, it was almost as if she was personally carrying the Olympic torch. And this brings us to the next intriguing event. The 33rd edition of the modern Olympics kicked off in Paris, France on 26 July 2024, 76 days after Swift's concert in Nanterre. 7 plus 6 is 13. Again, everything she does is timed around the number 13. As we learned in another video, the Olympics began 13 days after Trump was shot on the 13th of July, with the alleged gunman being declared dead 13 minutes after he was shot in the head. The opening ceremony of this particular Olympics can adeptly be described as divisive, since it involved a Christian-bashing take on Da Vinci's Last Supper painting that included, among others, transgenders and lesbians. All of this was clearly by design. Whether Taylor Swift was simply trying to worship the number 13 personally and the other sacred numbers, or whether there were esoteric experts at work in laying out her concert schedule, it simply cannot be denied that this was all manufactured. Hell, even the moon rose on the day of her final concert in Paris at 9:11 in the morning. Yet again, we see those sacred numbers associated with the moon and the final acts of the crucifixion as portrayed on 9/11. But was it satanic? You be the judge. So, have the Chiefs been fated to reach this point from the beginning? Possibly. Or has some member of the Kansas City Chiefs sold their soul, and by extension that of the team, to the devil in order to win the championship and the Super Bowl in 2024? The person I named as the most likely candidate was Travis Kelce, mostly from his actions early in the game, who in concert, if you pardon the pun, with his famous girlfriend, singer Taylor Swift, seemed to provide us with an enticing potential mirror echo replaying of the Tom Brady-Gisele Bündchen witchcraft team. If true, my own experience with evil spirits and research into this subject has shown me that there is always a payment in blood to be extracted. As the famous line states in one of my favorite TV shows, Once Upon a Time, all magic comes with a price. That price is usually borne by those closest to us, friends and family, long before the soul of the one who made the deal is extracted. We get to see who pays the mirror for our success. Seeing misfortune, therefore, could be a telltale signature of the deal with the devil. Not only did we have the mysterious deaths of those 3 Chiefs fans in Kansas City who were found frozen to death following the last regular season game, 33 days before the Super Bowl, and the woman who was shot 3 days after the Super Bowl during the parade, we had Patrick Mahomes' father being arrested 8 days before the Super Bowl in Tyler, Texas, on a DWI charge, his third. His arrest on 3 February 2024 and his indictment on 3 April 2024 on his third DWI charge firmly reveals the dreaded threes still continue to manifest. 30 days, another summed 3, after Patrick Mahomes Sr. was arrested, on 4 March 2024, Jason Kelce, Travis Kelce's brother, who played center for the Philadelphia Eagles, tearfully announced his retirement after 13, yep, another 13, seasons. This was 3 weeks and 1 day, 3-1, or a mirror of 13, after the Super Bowl and in the 3rd month, so both the 3s and the 13s are being felt. Sadly, this wasn't Jason Kelce's only misfortune. On 17 April 2024, it was reported that Jason had lost his 2018 Super Bowl ring for good. Apparently, he was involved with some sort of stunt involving a pool of chili. I think we will leave it right there. I don't want to know anymore. On 30 March 2024, a summed 3-3 day and month, in yet another incident involving Texas, Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice was driving a speeding Lamborghini and became involved in a 6-car crash in Dallas. several people were injured. Yet again, note the application of the threes. But not just the threes. You see, Rice was allegedly driving 119 miles per hour before the crash. Why 119? I mean, seriously, why not just say 120? Why report 119? Because it's the mere echo of a pair of very important esoteric numbers, 9 and 11, made famous on 9/11/2001. A little over a month later, on 7 May 2024, it was reported that Rice was under investigation for allegedly striking a photographer in a Dallas nightclub. On 2 April 2024, Jackson County, Missouri voters overwhelmingly rejected an effort to institute a sales tax to build a new stadium for the Royals downtown and to renovate Arrowhead Stadium for the Chiefs. Collectively, the two teams spent $5.7 million trying to brainwash voters into paying for their buildings instead of putting their money to use themselves, fixing whatever issues they have. For football teams in particular, a sizable portion of the common people who would be forced to fund these grandiose endeavors would never be able to enjoy them due to the price of attending a game, especially postseason. Like owning a new truck, it's simply out of reach. This led to threats of leaving the area, for example, from the wife of the Royals owner, who threw an angry, spoiled temper tantrum after the loss, claiming that the county would be lucky if both teams only relocated across state lines. This is how the rich view the poor, as if we owe them something. Just look at all the carnage, for lack of a better word. 4 dead fans, Patrick Mahomes Sr. arrested, Rashee Rice's troubles in Dallas, the very real threat of the entire Chiefs organization leaving Kansas City, and Travis Kelce's brother, Jason, losing his Super Bowl ring and choosing to retire. In the case of the latter, if the Chiefs hadn't went to the Super Bowl in 2024, would Jason Kelce have still chosen to retire? Maybe, or maybe not. If he'd have stuck it out for just one more year, he'd have another Super Bowl ring. Not only was his career over, the symbol of his success in said career was stripped from him, almost like everything about his years in football was being erased. Was his luck, if you will, being redirected to Travis as a result of the hypothetical deal with the devil? Or is this nothing but a crazy coincidence? Was all of the attention paid to Travis Kelce in 2023 merely the result of his, some would say, improbable relationship with Taylor Swift? Or were all of these events the payment for victory that wasn't deserved? And are we seeing the Chiefs crumbling before our eyes? Before we move on, allow me a brief digression, because this one is simply too perfect to let pass. On 14 March 2024, it was announced that Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce were teaming up to open a new steakhouse together. They partnered with the global hospitality group Noble 33 in order to open a steakhouse named 1587 Prime. So this announcement of a partnership with Noble 33 took place on the 33rd day following the Super Bowl, and it involved opening a place called 1587 Prime. Well, 1587 is not a prime number, but it is divisible by 3, and its digital root is 3. Why do all of these 3s and 13s continue to cluster? And does a deal with the devil even matter anyway, other than to get the one taking the deal to sell his most precious part? Especially if I am correct, and the Chiefs are slated to be the indicators of a stolen crown for a chief. And if that is their ultimate purpose, then no amount of deals or satanic sacrifices or witchcraft would ever matter. But what if I'm wrong? What if there was no deal with the devil? What if there was no witchcraft helping Tom Brady win all of his games? What if all these 3s and 33s and 13s are all in my head? What if those tragic deaths just happened and weren't part of some satanic sacrifice? What if it wasn't a force of darkness that assisted the Chiefs, but one of light? I always strive to bring a balanced account, so let's concentrate on the Christian element. First, we have Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes, without whom none of the Chiefs' Super Bowl victories would be possible. He engages in a prayer before every game, attends church regularly, and claims to be a devout Christian. However, he's also extremely superstitious and follows the same rituals from game to game. In other words, he doesn't really have faith in the gods. He has faith in the process, in the ritual itself. In many ways, this is no different than Tom Brady utilizing the rituals provided by his wife. Mahomes is merely following the same route as science. Find the repetition to recreate a particular result. Sadly, Mahomes, like most of us, apparently doesn't know what it means to have true faith. I'm the same way. Science inevitably can explain everything in the physical world. But what about the spiritual? The truest person of faith on the team likely has to be the kicker, Harrison Butker. If it wasn't for him, the Chiefs never would have made it to Super Bowl 58. Yes, while football is a team effort, it still comes down to the actions of key individuals in key situations. The job of the kicker is very much like that of the quarterback, only mirrored. While the quarterback uses his hands, the kicker uses his feet. If the quarterback fails to reach the end zone, but the goalposts are within the kicker's range, the latter tries to score. For the 2023 season, Butker rarely missed. Indeed, he made 33 of 35 field goal attempts. Oops, there's that number 33 again. Oh, and Butker, like Mahomes, entered the NFL in 2017. Yet another link back to that all-important critical year. After the Chiefs' victory in Super Bowl 57 the year earlier, Butker spent a week at a monastery in California in prayer and reflection, or whatever they do at such things. Clearly his beliefs, whether they be directed at an actual being or an imaginary construct, provide an environment whereby he can be the best that he can be. As I stated earlier, our beliefs help us form our reality. The very day before Taylor Swift's 87th concert of the Eras Tour, 11 May 2024, precisely 3 months after Super Bowl 58, and in the 13th week, Butker gave a commencement address at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. In it, he espoused traditional moral values, perfectly in line with his audience at a Catholic school, and he received a standing ovation at the completion. In no sane world would his comments be seen as divisive or demeaning or derogatory in any way. But this is hell, so insanity is the way of things. Quite naturally, his words upset many on the ideological left. You see, not only did Butker call out Biden for being a fake Catholic and for his abysmal handling of the COVID pandemic, he also denounced abortion rights, i.e. the right to commit murder, euthanasia, i.e. another right to commit murder, dangerous gender ideologies, degenerate cultural values in media, and the tyranny of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But by far his most vile and unforgivable sin was to praise his wife and to dare presume that the women present would actually look forward to being mothers and raising a family. No, this was simply too much for the radical left, who have been working tirelessly for decades at destroying the cohesiveness of the family. the Jewish-controlled media unleashed a firestorm of condemnation against him. Anything to knock down Christianity, their most hated enemy, even if it is fake Christianity and goddess worship. There was even a petition started on the third day, the 13th, by the way, to seek his firing from the chiefs. One of the most egregious and disturbing responses came from the sisters of Mount St. Scholastica, which is part of Benedictine College. The nuns literally twisted his words and claimed that he said something that he did not say. For example, they stated, "One of our concerns was the assertion that being a homemaker is the highest calling for a woman." And yet, Butker never said that. In point of fact, he stated, "I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker." Do you see what they did? Butker said that being a homemaker is one of the most important titles, not the highest calling for a woman. The only thing that he was doing was lauding the efforts of his wife. Since the Me Too movement began in 2017, men have constantly been berated because they ostensibly fail to recognize the efforts of women. Here, the effort by a man to praise a woman is shamed by women. Why? Does this prove the old adage that women are never satisfied? In this case, the sisters completely invented something about which to bitch. It was similar to a bunch of witches gathered around a boiling cauldron and throwing various items in to cast a spell. Even worse, they then went on to laud their own vocation, essentially praising the superiority of childless career over family. Why is this worse? First of all, it represents vanity or pride, one of the 7 deadly sins. Second of all, motherhood is the most important endeavor for a woman in the physical world, while being a sister in the service of God would be the most important endeavor of the spiritual realm, wouldn't it? Their inability to recognize this simple fact was a clear indication of the appalling extent of their own brainwashing, their own fall. I would really like to know what they offer as counsel to children that the media has confused regarding their unchangeable gender. Do they tell them that God may have made a boo-boo in their case, and that it's okay to consider transitioning because now God has given man the ability to choose what parts of creation he can change if he wishes? Do they seriously tell children that the God they claim to worship is fallible and made a mistake? If so, that is frightening in a multitude of ways. Consider that these sisters literally took a page from Lucifer's playbook, twisted the words of Butker, and invented something out of thin air about which to become upset. They complained about him causing division, and yet they were the ones that promoted division. It's all projection. It's bad enough when the media does this crap. It is beyond acceptable. Indeed, it is absolutely appalling to consider that nuns did this. They lied, pure and simple, and when called out by many, they made no effort to make amends. They are the ones who should forfeit their jobs. They are the ones who should be seeking forgiveness. At the very least, they owe Butker an apology and a retraction. None of this is surprising because the fathers at the top at Benedictine College are just as bad and just as brainwashed. If they actually believed in the truth espoused by Christ, they would have moved to quickly set things right. They would have done the right thing. Why am I so passionate about this? because priests and nuns must be held to a higher moral standard than the rest of their degenerate flocks. Yes, we all make mistakes, and we can all be forgiven, but we must show at least some contrition when we are wrong, shouldn't we? Did any of these nuns go to confession over their blatant lying? I wonder. What I see here is a perfect analogy to the screaming Jews lining Christ's path to the crucifixion, with the nuns playing the Jews. I can see Christ telling God the Father to forgive the nuns, for they know not what they do. Just like the Jews in Christ's time were brainwashed, so too are these representatives of the church today. Sadly, their overreaction and their inaction to correct their own sins in this matter shows that those who claim to be of Christ are not really of Christ, but, as the subtitle of my latest book queries, are actually Satanists in denial. There was at least one positive from all of the manufactured controversy. The people seemed to really be supporting Butker. Within a week, sales of his merchandise, jerseys, etc., were tops for the Chiefs. And so, given what we have seen, was the Chiefs' victory in Super Bowl 58 the result of unparalleled excellence on their part? A deal with the devil? Tremendously powerful faith in God the Father? Or was it simply a role that they were fated to play from the very beginning of their birth, to function as prophets of doom, warning of the theft of a crown for a chief? Or could it be a combination of all? Before you answer, consider the following. As stated, Harrison Butker's comments that created such controversy were made precisely 3 months after Super Bowl 58, in the 13th week. In the 3rd month, and in the 13th week afterwards, he became the highest-paid kicker in the NFL, securing a 4-year, $25.6 million contract, joining Kelsey as the highest-paid tight end and Reed as the highest-paid coach. These three got their Chiefs' kingdoms all from the win in Super Bowl 58. But then, 3 months later, Butker would undergo knee surgery on 15 November. Up to that point, the Chiefs were undefeated in the 2024 season at 9-0. 3 days later, the Chiefs lost their first game of the season to the Buffalo Bills. And while I haven't been able to confirm this, since Butker was placed on the injured reserve on Thursday, 14 November, it stands to reason that he may have been injured during the game against the Broncos on the 10th. If true, that was precisely 13 weeks prior to Super Bowl 59, a game that they lost. Oh, those crazy numbers. So what are we seeing here? First, as we have clearly seen throughout this video, there are definitely sacred numbers that seem to affect, or at the very least, betray, our reality. Not just the numbers 3 and 13, which would include 33 and 333, and any mirroring like 31, but also 5 and 7 and 9 and 11 and 17 and 19, to name a few. They all have different meanings and functions, like words in a language. They don't just reflect numerical quantity. They're also conceptual symbols. Every letter and every number is, at its core, a symbol. When we ignore these symbols, we essentially shut off half of our language. We become deaf and dumb and easily led and misled, because the elite constantly communicate using this long-ignored language. In this video, I deliberately focused primarily on how 3 and 13 were intimately tied to the Kansas City Chiefs. But if that's the case, if the number 3 was so important to the Chiefs, why did they not win their three-peat? That's a very good question. The simple answer is that their role was complete, and the next stage of the messaging was in play and handed off to another team. When the Chiefs played the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 59, they played as badly as they played in Super Bowl 55 against Tom Brady. Anybody who has watched these games knows that the Chiefs were not themselves. It was like throwing a switch. Something supernatural happened in those games. Whether this was the result of witchcraft, a deal with the devil, God's will, fate, or something we don't as yet understand, something did happen. And if you are as sensitive as I am when it comes to things feeling out of place, you likely felt it with those games. But honestly, something felt off with the entire Chiefs 2024 season. They were winning games that they weren't good enough to win, that they shouldn't have won. Mahomes didn't look nearly as good in the 2024 season as he did in seasons past. Something was happening. A flip was occurring. Whatever this process was seemed to get a shove with Butker's surgery and their first loss of the season. And then, just 3 hours into the new year, there was the insane manufactured truck attack on Bourbon Street in New Orleans by a black man in a white Ford Lightning, host city for Super Bowl 59. 14 people were murdered, and dozens were injured. It felt very much like another satanic sacrifice on the change of a new year, symbolizing, again, a flip. And then, later that same day, a Tesla Cybertruck blew up outside of Trump's building in Las Vegas, site of Super Bowl 58 the previous year. 2 incidents involving electric trucks, terrorism, and the site of the current and previous Super Bowls? Seems like the focus was on the Super Bowl for some reason, and even Trump. The last vestiges of the Chiefs' association with the number 3 seem to have occurred during the championship game between the Buffalo Bills and the Chiefs, held on 26 January 2025. In particular, the game was tied at 29-all when the Chiefs kicked a field goal to gain 3 points with 3 minutes and 33 seconds left on the clock in the fourth quarter. The game was essentially over because the Bills were never able to come back. Seriously, 3 points with 3 minutes and 33 seconds left on the clock. The Chiefs would go on to lose their 3rd postseason game of the season in Super Bowl 59. The flip was complete, and when I saw Mahomes be intercepted by the Eagles' number 33 in the second quarter during the Super Bowl and run it 38 yards for a touchdown, I knew the Chiefs were destined to lose. I knew a transfer had occurred. What happened? Did the hypothetical paranormal power now migrate to the Eagles? Why? If I am correct that the Chiefs' win in Super Bowl 58 was meant to represent the crown being stolen from Biden when he was prevented from running again, and ushering back in the Chief, Trump, with the revamped dark light of division, could the eagle have been the primary focus for Super Bowl 59's messaging? Remember, for some strange reason, 248 years after our Declaration of Independence, some empty suit in Congress thought it was necessary for the eagle to finally be named the national bird of the United States on Christmas Eve 2024. Don't forget that the aircraft that was struck by the military helicopter when landing in Washington, D.C. on the 9th day of Trump's second reign was an American Eagle. That helicopter was on a continuity of government mission. Were they trying to tell us that there will be no continuity for the government of the eagle? Now, you can laugh, but this is how the elite communicate with the brain-dead human herd. But most importantly, how did Taylor Swift seem to know that the Chiefs would lose Super Bowl 59? What do I mean? Remember, I told you that for the 2023 season, Swift only attended 13 games, 9 regular season and 4 postseason games. 13 is her favorite number. Everything revolves around that particular number for her. Everything. We witnessed some examples here. Then why, for the 2024 season, did she only attend 10 games, including the Super Bowl? For someone who openly worships the number 13, this screams that there's something wrong here. For someone who chose to honor the Chiefs and her boyfriend 13 weeks after Super Bowl 58, and yet doesn't apply the same rituals for this year, screams that she somehow knew that they would lose. But how? Or was it something else? Think back to that concert in Nanterre, France, taking place in the La Défense Arena, when Kelsey is a member of the offensive line. Could they be linked? Was she simply like Tom Brady's wife, Gisele Bündchen, who somehow knew which games her husband would win and which he would lose? Did Swift simply not even bother to maintain the illusion because that would trash her view of the power of 13 in her life? Or was this an effort to deliberately bring about the Chiefs' loss in Super Bowl 59? This is a glaring inconsistency that begs for clarification. Why didn't she follow the same rituals and attend the same number of games if 13 is so important in her life? Take note that 10 is 3 short of 13. So, yet again, the numbers 3 and 13 reign supreme. And this brings us to the whole point of this extended video. 13 months, 3 weeks and 3 days after the 3 Chiefs fans were found dead, and 3 weeks and 3 days after Super Bowl 59, we just can't get away from those 3s and 13s, folks. On 5 March 2025, yes, in the 3rd month, the Platte County prosecutor finally made 2 arrests in connection with their deaths. One of the men charged was the friend at whose house the 3 fans were found frozen. So many questions. Why did it take so long? How can there be any arrests at all when the case was 100% not being investigated as a homicide, according to the police? Why did it take the prosecutor 13 months? They essentially allowed a source of fentanyl to remain on the streets throughout that time. Why? The overt presence of these 13s and 3s certainly seems to me like the Freemasonic Brotherhood made a call to the prosecutor so that things could only happen by the numbers. Either that, or I really have uncovered the esoteric secrets underpinning all of reality. You decide. What do you think, my fellow souls? Individual Chiefs players dying, or the Chiefs team as a whole winning around the time of a coup, or the theft of a crown for a political chief? The incredible synchronicity displayed by the numbers 3, 33, 333, and 13. The links to COVID and eclipses. The possible inclusion of witchcraft, satanic rituals, or deals with the devil to influence the outcome of games. The linkage to Christ or Christmas in certain events. Groundhog Day. Biblical divisions of .333 and .666, denoting the birthright divisions of female and male, respectively. Football itself being deliberately designed as a giant fertility ritual. Is any of this real, or merely a colossal coincidence, and a product of my rather prodigious imagination? It seems too fanciful to be true, but what if it is? What if things are actually much worse? What if what you see on the surface is simply a suit of clothes with paints and powders meant to beautify and obscure the naked truth of our repressive reality? What if this video is just peeking behind the veil and glimpsing the wizard or the witch behind the scenes? I'm merely presenting my rather unique perspective on reality, or as I call it, hell. Submitted for your educated assessment. You decide what it means to you. Postscript. It's very likely that many of you are not sold on the idea of the supernatural directing the outcome of football games. However, consider for a moment the case of Tom Brady. He was a rather unimpressive prospect coming out of college, and wasn't drafted by the New England Patriots until the 6th round, 199th overall. He mostly sat out the 2000 season with very scant playtime. In the 2001 season, the Patriots would lose the first game, but then, on the third day, something both tragic and beneficial happened. The events of 9/11. In the very next game, the Patriots starting quarterback, Drew Bledsoe, would suffer internal bleeding following a nasty hit. Brady entered the game late in the fourth quarter, but by then the Patriots' fate was sealed. They lost 10-3 to the New York Jets. Notice that team, New York Jets, especially since Jets allegedly struck the Twin Towers in New York just 12 days earlier. And 12 is another summed 3. In the next game, Brady was starter. Indeed, like someone flipping a switch, the once mediocre player would suddenly and miraculously transform and win 11 of the 14 regular season games, losing only 3. He then went on to win all 3 postseason games, including Super Bowl 36, by 3 points, giving the Patriots their very first Super Bowl win in their 3rd Super Bowl appearance, just like the reborn Chiefs would later win their 3rd Super Bowl appearance. Brady would win 6 Super Bowls for the Patriots over the span of 18 seasons, with both the first and the last win being over the Rams. But why? Was it just a crazy coincidence that 9/11 took place and then everything changed? Things seemed to flip. Look at the team's name, Patriots. At that time, patriotism was reborn, and the U.S. would wage war against manufactured enemies. Some of these things can certainly be manipulated by the elite who rule us. But what about Tom Brady's turnaround? What about Mahomes winning by 3 points with a 3-yard touchdown and 3 seconds left on the clock, and throwing for 333 yards? Clearly, there is something paranormal or outside of our accepted understanding taking place. Or was it all a case of witchcraft? Either way, things are not as they appear. But did life really just flip after 9/11? Or did we all simply die? Did the world actually end at that point and we didn't realize it? Like various parasites or fungi continue to live on within a body after death? Or perhaps has death itself, instead of being experienced in a tiny moment, been drawn out over several decades so that the pain and horror can be experienced as long as possible? Sound crazy? Think about it. Every decade prior to 2000 had a very distinct flavor. When you think about the 1990s, or the 80s, or the 70s, or the 60s, or the 50s, or the 40s, or the 30s, or the 20s, the images that come to mind reveal that every decade was its own unique and brilliant self, almost like a child of time. It was a moment all its own. But what happened after 9/11? That unique decadal flavor is now gone. Cars primarily became white or black or gray, dreary colors of death, instead of being bright and vibrant. Movies and TV started to stagnate to the point that all we have are poor remakes and reboots. Music became bland and uninspired. Even the Super Bowl started having the same participant over and over, with the Patriots appearing 9 times in 18 seasons, on average every other year. Had that ever happened in football to that point? We're now in the 3rd decade since 9/11, and nothing has been unique about any of these 3 decades. It's all the same. Why? Simple. We can't create anything new because we don't exist. We are like fleas on a dog's back, but the dog is dead. Look at the debasing of cultural morals that went into overdrive since 9/11. All around us, society is in a death spiral. It didn't happen overnight. It took some time for the flywheel of time to stop spinning, but it did happen. The body is dead, and we are all either dead or dying, certainly culturally, and very likely even physically. There is much more to this story, but the elite want us to believe that the spiritual center no longer exists. It's all satanic. Every aspect of our reality, our deathality, revolves around those who rule, openly seeking to kill us. They've always done this, but they've always hidden in the shadows. This new openness began in 2020 with the scamdemic. Why 2020? Because having 2020 vision means that we can now see clearly. Evil stepped out of the shadows to openly take a bow for leading us here. They know that nothing will be done to stop them. They are the cleanup crew, the vultures, the ones sent to complete the crucifixion and get on with the Great Reset, the resurrection. This cell of time is ending because time itself is literally running out, just like the air in a diver's tank eventually becomes depleted. It's why COVID's main symptom was breathing difficulties that mimic high-altitude sickness. It's all part of the message they are sending. If you found this topic interesting, please check out my other videos and my books. My website is www.mastersofthemirror.com. Thanks.